OnePlus has gotten a lot of flack from its fans over the past few years for changing the direction that the company had originally started out with. What began as a brand that made flagship phones at almost half the price of its competitors, OnePlus sought to join what they were supposed to destroy. This is somewhat changed with the release of the OnePlus 10 Pro, which has great specs at a lesser price than rival flagships, similar to how they used to operate. The iQOO 9 Pro is no different, and it definitely has the potential to be an intriguing choice with its sexy design and quality specs for an acceptable price. How will they stand up to their sister brand's newest flagship, the Oppo Find X5 Pro? Ready the cameras and let the facts speak. Now, this isn't widespread knowledge, but still, quite a few people know that these brands are connected to each other. In fact, one of the things that OnePlus fans were complaining about was that the brand is actually looking more and more like Oppo, both software and hardware-wise. This is somewhat relevant when looking at the photos because there honestly aren't major differences in quality between the three. It's also important to mention that even when there are differences, they're not consistent. For example, in one photo, you've got the Find X5 Pro software interpreting the white balance inaccurately in an incomparable way with the iQOO 9 Pro. The OnePlus 10 Pro looks to be a mix between them, but what's also important is to be able to realize that the quality of all the photos are good, regardless of their contrasting looks. In another, the OnePlus 10 Pro is missing a bit of detail when the talking point is dynamic range, and while the iQOO 9 Pro makes up for that, the focus isn't 100% accurate. iQOO does seem to have the punchiest colors most of the time, but it's ultimately up to you if you prefer warmer colors that kind of put more life into the photos or cooler photos that look more natural. The wide camera of all the devices perform adequately, which is definitely the focal point of this category. But the ultra-wide lens, on the other hand, did give us more to play around with, and I can't say I'm particularly impressed with the ultra-wide camera of iQOO. The images are a bit too saturated for my taste, as I prefer the less aggressive visuals of OnePlus and Oppo. Overall, the differences are very minimal and don't really propel one phone over the other, as all three will be tied for the photo category. This definitely won't become a habit though, as portrait mode is full of surprises. If you haven't already, check out our video comparing the Find X5 Pro against the beast flagships of Samsung and Google and see how well Oppo performed against them. You can also drop a sub and like this video if you're having a good time. So basically, Oppo had stepped up their game and pulled a Samsung, which means that they were really adamant in rivaling Apple in their software. Well, it seems that OnePlus is also on the same boat. When the OnePlus 9 Pro came out, it got quite a bit of criticism for its software, and the portrait mode was greatly improved over months and months of updates. Now though, it looks like they wanted to do things perfectly straight off the bat. Oppo is also doing some things right, such as what I mentioned in the last video about the edge detection technology around even the most sensitive areas such as my hair. OnePlus isn't holding any punches back either, as this is a seriously impressive performance because this definitely wasn't how things went when their previous model first came out. iQOO isn't too shabby either, just that the subject in the photos is sometimes way too soft, which in turn kinda defeats the purpose of this mode because you need the sharpness to be able to accurately utilize the edge detection technology and separate the foreground and the background. The bokeh is all good and well, but I like the Find X5 Pro, and especially like the OnePlus 10 Pro more because of how pleasing the photos look to the eye as a whole. OnePlus will take the 3 points here, along with some applause for wanting to prove their critics wrong. Oppo is a close second, with iQOO in third place, as we slowly move towards videography. No iPhones, Samsungs, or Googles allowed in this video, so let's see how these sister brands fare against each other. First impressions, the iQOO 9 Pro's videos are unnecessarily dark. It definitely doesn't make the video unwatchable, but you're missing out on key details on visuals that are far away. Now, if it was just this by itself, we could have worked something out. But the videos aren't just darker, they're also softer. I can see Sony fans rubbing their hands together because I know how much you like softer photos and videos in contrast to artificial sharpness, but it doesn't bode well when the lighting is not dominant enough to balance it out. The OnePlus 10 Pro definitely handles things better, and the Oppo Find X5 Pro handles things the best in terms of general clarity and detail. As for 8K though, iQOO's got video at 30 FPS, while OnePlus allows you to do 24 FPS. The main difference between these two is that OnePlus has included electronic image stabilization regardless of the resolution, while iQOO is missing out on this for 8K, even though one of their main selling points is the gimbal stabilization written on the back of the phone. In terms of quality though, iQOO's 8K video looks amazing. Cinematic is the word that I'm looking for, and it's like I'm watching some Disney Pixar movies. The footage from OnePlus is overly sharpened, and since 8K is used to capture pretty much every single detail in a video, sharpening it to such a degree doesn't really make sense. Oppo doesn't have an 8K feature, which is quite sad, but I'm sure we'll get that in their next flagship phone. So let's go through a quick recap. For the 4K video, I prefer Oppo due to the clarity, and OnePlus is a close second. For the 8K though, IQOO has done an amazing job, and OnePlus obviously comes after since Oppo doesn't have an 8K feature. They each have their own ups and downs, and it's fair to say that the points will be split between them equally. Could that be said about another category though, and I feel stabilization is something that these phones have definitely copied from each other, because I really don't see that much of a dissimilarity between them, though I will say that I expected more from the IQOO 9 Pro with its gimbal stabilization. I feel they've overcomplicated things so much rather than just focusing on a standard and active stabilization mode like on the Google Pixel 6 Pro, that not only is it hard to understand what they're doing, the quality of the stabilization also isn't on the same level of the Pixel. You've got standard stabilization here, ultra stabilization next to it, horizontal stabilization for what I'm guessing filming horizontally, when that's what you're most likely going to be doing most of the time anyway, and another stabilization here which doesn't seem to do anything whether you turn it on or off. So while these three phones are on par and will definitely share 3 points in this category, I definitely would have liked to see some more clarity from IQOO. Let's slow it down just a little and take a look at the zooming capabilities of these devices. IQOO has put in a 2.5x optical zoom on their flagship, while OnePlus has opted with a 3.3x telephoto lens. Oppo has gone with the same zoom that was on their previous flagship, a 2x optical zoom. Oppo also looks to be better early on, with slightly sharper imaging, with IQOO starting to pick up speed at 10x and beyond, where you can definitely see the quality difference between the IQOO 9 Pro and the OnePlus 10 Pro along with the Oppo Find X5 Pro. Oppo being dominant in the early zoom levels will be balanced out with IQOO's later performance and will grant them a tie for first place, while OnePlus will take second. Will this also be true for the opposite category, which is known to be macro? It very well could be because OnePlus has dropped the ball here. For clarification, I'm a OnePlus user. I have the OnePlus 8 base version that I bought like 2 years ago. And forget about the macro mode, it has a dedicated macro lens, which, let's be honest, it's not amazing, but still does a decent job. The OnePlus 10 Pro doesn't even have a macro mode. The 9 had one, so I really have no idea why they dropped this from their lineup when every other phone has this mode these days. Fear not though, as the Google method works for OnePlus as well. You pop the 3.3x optical zoom and you're able to replicate the missing macro mode. Is it perfect? No, but it's better than nothing. IQOO and Oppo are very similar, but the IQOO 9 Pro can get a tiny bit closer to the subject than the Oppo Find X5 Pro, which will allow it to take first place, with Oppo chasing after it with 2 points. I wish these brands had also chased after whoever's responsible for the video requirements regarding the front camera, because is 1080p at 30 FPS enough? Not to mention, the quality doesn't even look good enough to justify this resolution, as IQOO looks very soft like before. Oppo is for sure sharper than OnePlus, but the quality in general isn't up to my standards. Selfies are pretty equal all around, with one photo of the OnePlus 10 Pro severely lacking dynamic range, and taking into consideration the slightly better video quality of the Oppo Find X5 Pro, it will take the crown for the front camera category, while the other two contestants will be tied for second. Now, I already slowed down things once, but this time, it's gonna come naturally because we're gonna be looking at birds. Chirpity chirp chirp, look at those little wings. Pretty self-explanatory here, since even though you can go down to 720p on the IQOO 9 Pro, it doesn't increase the frame rate to 480 like on the OnePlus 10 Pro as well as the Oppo Find X5 Pro. Even though 720p isn't the best of quality, we really try to look for variety in this category, and that very same variety will give OnePlus and Oppo the 3 points, tied for first place. Enough of these birds though, let's move on to rabbits. Chocolate rabbits to be precise. I'm on a diet though, so I had someone else do this footage for me. When the subject is slow, all three phones are almost the same. When the subject is fast, or when it speeds up though, the IQOO 9 Pro seems to have the best and easiest time focusing as soon as it comes into the frame. Oppo and OnePlus pretty much have the same results, and they'll be taking second place together, like the sisters they are. Yo, what's happening guys? We're back again, and we're comparing these brand new phones we have for you. On the left, what you see is the IQOO 9 Pro. In the middle is our brand new OnePlus 10 Pro. And here we have the Oppo Find X5 Pro. I'm on the street, a lot of cars behind me. Maybe you might hear me, maybe you might not. Let us know which one you think has the best audio quality. Now, I'm pretty sure you're going, what in the world was that? Yeah, sound cancelling at its finest, or in this case, the lack of it. IQOO has done a decent job with the audio, even when you're trying to speak to someone under very windy conditions. The same can't be said for the other two, as the wind is almost completely drowning out the audio. Congrats to the IQOO 9 Pro for this performance, as they'll be bagging another 3 points, with the sisters once again tying for second place. And finally, we have the night footage. Oppo has already proven itself in night photos, and you'll be aware of this if you watched our first video with the Find X5 Pro, where we put it up against the iPhone 13 Pro Max and the Galaxy S22 Ultra. I especially like how they managed to protect the originality of the shot by not blowing up the sky or turning up the brightness of the subject. There definitely needs to be some software intervention to make photos at night usable, but there's definitely a point to be made about phones that can keep the view looking naturally beautiful while allowing the footage to be usable. This is especially true for the ultra-wide camera, as Oppo's looks fantastic and the other two are average at best. The same can't be said for night video though, as the OnePlus 10 Pro is showing visible flashbacks from the good night video quality of the OnePlus 9 Pro. IQOO doesn't seem to have put much effort into perfecting night mode shenanigans, and while Oppo has, OnePlus is just better in both wide and ultra-wide video. This will give them a tie for first place, with IQOO taking second. That was a bumpy but fun ride, and it's refreshing to get more Android phones from Asia into the mix to see how they're holding up. Taking a look at the points, we see that the Oppo Find X5 Pro takes first place in this comparison with 29 points. The IQOO 9 Pro will come in second place with 28 points, and the OnePlus 10 Pro right after with just 27 points. This was insanely close, and just for some extra content, if the OnePlus 10 Pro hadn't removed their macro mode, it would have most likely been first, or at least tied for first, so this just shows how close these phones are to each other in terms of camera quality. Thanks for the views guys, and it'll be very helpful if you could like this video and hit that sub button so we can keep on marching forward. The next video is coming up soon. See you then.